Hello and welcome back to the Fullerton College Prepress class. This is Professor Ben Hewitt with video 3 of the PIA's Prepress Training Manual, section 6.8 review. Let's talk about page layout software. Page layout software is why we're taking this class together. Page layout software is what took the physical art of setting up, of doing prepress, of creating layouts and getting them ready to print, and moved it onto the computer. What it does, it lets you combine text, pixel images, and vector images to make a document. Previously, you would have to do this using knives and rulers and rubber cement on a light table, and then take pictures of the process camera, develop the film, and use the film to expose plates. Well, now you don't do that anymore. You have sophisticated control over your layout and all the elements in it, and the ability to make high-quality PDFs that plate makers are going to be able to use. Let's talk about PDFs. PDFs are, for the foreseeable future, the greatest thing that happened to digital printing since the beginning of digital printing and digital layout. It's short for portable document format, so you don't have to worry about ATM machining when you're talking about PDFs. You can say PDF file. It sounds wrong, but it is technically correct, so you can be a pedant about it if you like. It was developed by Adobe originally using PostScript. Remember, PostScript is that secret language that printers and computers share to describe images and text when you send it to print. When you say file print, your computer's converting your document to PostScript and sending that to whatever printer's connected through the network. But PDF uses similar language and makes a version of it that's easier to use. I guess in real world languages, you could say that perhaps PostScript is Old Latin. Hard to speak, hard to spell. The grammar is near impossible, but it describes things very accurately. And maybe PDFs are modern Spanish, which is actually quite good at describing things, but much easier to speak. So that's my ham-handed blunt force analogy, because yeah, there you go. It's derived from it, but it's definitely easier to use than the older version. So PDFs were using PostScript, and they were originally designed as a way of sending files around an office building network on early LANs, local area networks. This was a way of sending that office memo without printing it off and having some guy in a mail cart deliver it to everyone's cubicle. Instead, can you believe it? You could send these memos by computer to people's computer screens. Kind of a primitive pre-email email. But it turns out that that type of PostScript-based simplified and reduced file sizes that work good on computer networks still printed stable. And that was a way then of streamlining and simplifying computer print files and making them able to transfer across networks, especially early networks, much quicker. PDFs are now the way to get a file to print. And it's the file type you should be asking your clients for when they're sending you files they made. And thank goodness everyone can make them at their computers now, because they've gone open source and everyone has a distiller at least that's able to take a printable PostScript, you say file print, save as, and you're able to produce a PDF. So PDFs are the way to go. It's a container format. A PDF is not a single file type. It's not text, it's not vector, it's not raster. In fact, it contains all of these. It's like a computer file casserole. It's not a pasta. It's not a meat. It's not a vegetable. It's not cheese. But all four of those things you better believe are going to be in that casserole. And it's going to be delicious. This is why you should never record videos when you're hungry. You always come back to the food analogies. Anyways, they can be compressed. The images can be controlled and sampled larger or smaller as necessary. You can add ICC profiles to manage the color. And importantly, you can embed things like fonts so that anyone opening it on their end sees exactly what you sent and things don't move around. You don't need, you won't find EPSs or TIFFs or PDFs in them, or sorry, EPSs or TIFFs, but vector and raster objects that are PDF native. And so here's a sample. This is actually an awesome piece of PDFception where it's a PDF in a PDF, because you're currently watching a video, but inside that video is Adobe Acrobat. Inside Adobe Acrobat, we have a PDF, but inside our PDF, there's a PDF. Sorry, I went weird on you. Anyways, it just shows that this is in a PDF, like all the slides I've showed you this entire semester, it's full of things like vector graphics for logos and background images, background patterns and stuff. And then you have raster images, all the photos that show up in it, and text, and they all exist together in a PDF. So here's some common file types. We've gone into these in more detail in the past, so we'll just run through what they are. And it's worth knowing, just looking at those extensions, what that means, where it's from, and you'll understand a bit about what it needs and how you should use it. A .imdd is the Adobe InDesign document. It's not on here, but let me add a .idml is the backwards compatible InDesign document that lets it work with older versions. That's InDesign markup language. But INDD is Adobe InDesign document. You need InDesign to open it. .qxp, which is really deliciously symmetrical, that logo. It's great. Anyways, QXP is a Quark Express document. That's AI is an Adobe Illustrator document. .psd is a Photoshop file. JPG or JPEG is the Joint Photographic Experts Group. That's a JPEG. And that's the lossy type of digital image. TIFF or TIFF, 1 or 2 Fs, depending on your extension system on your computer. That's the tagged image file format. And that's the lossless raster image. Higher quality, but bigger file size. .bmp is a bitmap file. Typically that's black and white, although there are some color bitmaps out there I hear. And that's an older Windows version of the TIFF, but not nearly as good. .png is a portable networks graphic that is designed for internet viewing and sending across networks, not designed for printing. Resolution can be good, but the colors cannot be managed or cannot be profile tagged, and it does not support CMYK. It will always have to be translated when you output. So it can work, but it's a little bit of a wild card. EPS is the older version of what a proper output file would be. Encapsulated PostScript. It was literally PostScript. That language that you talk to the printer with from your computer, just saved instead of printed. But that has fallen by the wayside because the PDF, which is based off the EPS, but much more refined, has kind of taken over. Excuse me. Oh, yes, talk about types for a moment. Type 1 fonts are the old ones. These are the ones my dad worked on originally at Xerox back in the late 70s, early 80s, when digital printing was just starting to be a thing. Type 1 fonts have 2 files within them. There is the screen font, and I mean the monitor font, the one you see on your computer, and you have the outline printer font. The screen font is raster. It's a bitmap pixely thing. And in fact, it didn't even look that good because computer monitors weren't that good. But the actual vector information that we know and love that makes type look so perfect at any size you print it, that still existed. It just gave you a low res preview for your computer monitor because computers had not yet evolved or developed the adequate processing power to translate all that vector to visual on your monitor in real time like they do now. So at the time, the only way you could do it in any sort of decent amount of time frame was to show you a preview, and you had to know your fonts, and you'd trust that that weird gobbledygook pile of squares on your screen that's barely legible is in fact a beautiful Palatino italic when it prints. Also, being older, they are limited to 256 glyphs, which means, that's right, there's really only a certain amount of computer memory, 1 byte being applied to that. Truetype is found on both Mac and Windows. That's the other thing about type 1s is type 1s are typically native to either Mac or Windows and don't translate from one to the other. Good luck with that if you run into them. Even these oldest fonts still produce good output and are still fully usable. The dangerous part of that is they are still used. You might run into one of those, it might pop up in circulation, like getting a valuable historic coin as change from a grocery store. But other than being valuable, it'd be more difficult to work with. You get something that's like, great, technically this is correct. What am I going to do with it? Like getting gold coin change from somewhere. Like, great, I just wanted a paper dollar bill. It fits in my wallet. Now I have a pocket full of gold coins. Thank you so much for giving me 17 gold coins as change. It's that sort of thing with the, where was I going? With finding a Truetype. They still work great. They're just inconvenient. Anyways, so Truetype is found on both Mac and Windows. You're still only getting 256 glyphs, but the main thing is there's 1 font now. There's no screen font versus printer font. The actual printer font, the vector information of the character shapes themselves are translated directly into your eyeballs by your computer. There's no secondary preview that you're looking at. The low ASCII characters are the same across platforms, but the high ASCIIs are not. So this is an issue with things like ligatures, fractions, any non-English Roman characters like the French C with the squiggly, or Spanish things like ñes and stress marks for accents over words. Also things from Northern Europe and Central Europe. So your umlauts, your tall S's, and some of your other Germanic or Nordic characters like the things with the lines and the carets over them, those all get mapped differently. So if you take those from a Mac to a Windows or the other way around, they show up wrong or just kind of error out because their identity is not their letter. Their identity is the weird Unicode thing of how you get them. So on a Mac, let's go with ñes for a second. It's like Option N, N. But on Windows, it's like Alt Control U plus 17862 something or other. I'm probably getting that wrong off the top of my head. Don't try that out on your computers. It's probably not correct. It's just an example. Anyways, that's an issue with those. And that comes to be a problem when you're working with mailing lists and stuff that are international, because you're going to get those higher ASCII characters showing up more common than you think. If you want to mail anything to Mexico, our neighbor to the south, or Canada to our neighbor to the north, you need high ASCII characters for either Spanish or French letters, because those do actually become necessary. Anything sent to Canada by law has to be able to be in French too, if you're talking packaging. Anyways, Opentype. Opentype is great. Opentype is the most recent version. It's a better version of Truetype. It has more glyphs in it, so you can have alternates for all the letters and a ton of things. They're mapped the same across things. It's co-developed by Adobe and Microsoft. It's, again, only one file. What you see is what your computer is going to print. There's no preview involved, and you can have 65,000 glyphs. Now, Truetype, Opentype, and Type 1, they can all work on the same layout in the same program. InDesign, Quark Express, they can work with any of those, no problem. The only issue would come with computer compatibility. If you have the wrong operating system and if something's really old, it may not run on your newest system. But they're all valid. They all produce the same output and the same level of output. Anyways, all modern output devices will produce equal results from all of them, unless, of course, you have the weird substitution problem of having different versions of something, in which case the spacing may be off. But that's more because they're different versions, not because of the format. Let's talk about preflighting. Preflighting is what we're here for in Prepress, typically. Preflighting means you look for problems. We go looking for trouble. Preflighting means you take a client's file or your own. It's really humbling to look at your own, I tell you. And you go through it and you look for the issues. You try to figure out, will this work or not? And more often than not, why will this not work? You're looking for the problems. File repair means you're fixing the problems. In medical terms, preflighting is diagnosis only. I know it's becoming an older show now, but if anybody remembers or has rewatched during the pandemic, House, Hugh Laurie's second greatest thing ever behind Blackadder, where he is basically Sherlock Holmes. Actually, it is a Sherlock Holmes story told medically, but he's there diagnosing people for weird diseases and figuring out what they have and how they can be cured. But at that point, he's bored. The puzzle's over. Why bother? Someone else, a general care doctor, they can come look at the person and actually give them the meds, give them the treatments, ask them how they're feeling, blah, blah, blah. He's bored. Next problem, let's move on. That's preflighting. File repair is all the other medical shows where the doctors care for the patients and they help them through their recoveries and help them fix their problems. So there's a difference between preflighting and file repair. Preflighting is only looking for the issues. File repair is actually fixing them. File repair, also from a business standpoint, preflight is always a part of the job of the printers. We always check our files before we print them. You don't want to find a problem sometime during the print run. That's awful, or after. That can ruin your relationship with a client and wreck people's businesses and do all sorts of things. And at the very least, you're embarrassed because you made a mistake or you didn't catch their mistake. More often than not, is the actual issue. So while that's included, file repair increases the time and cost of a job. So that needs to be negotiated separately with the client. I'm going to cut this video off here. We'll come back for another one soon. Thanks for listening.